I'm Jim Knight, co-founder of the Instructional Coaching Group, and you're listening to Coaching Conversations, where I talk with coaching experts from around the world so that all of us can learn better ways to make an unmistakably positive impact on the people around us.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching Questions Show on the Coaching Conversations podcast with Jim Knight. This show is for everyone that calls the Instructional Coaching Group home for all your instructional coaching content. These episodes are designed for everyone who desires to think and learn alongside Jim and myself as you continue to make an impact with all the great work you do. I'm Jessica Wise, a proud member of our ICG consultant team. Today, we'll talk about the collaborative exploration of data. Once our Q&A has come to a close, we'll have an epilogue or a final note at the end of the show with a question to wrap up our discussion before we sign off. So, on with the show. Hi, Jim.
Jessica, good to see you.
Good to see you. As always, I'm admiring the curtains.
You like the curtains?
I do like the curtains.
They're a
Yes.
little askew. There's a
Okay.
little gap there that I'm feeling kind of bad about, but
Yeah, I
still
do see one
nice.
gap.
Yeah. Oh,
But
well.
I like them. I see more color in your face. It's like you're all lit up. It's great.
You know, the gap is there because, as the great singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen says, the cracks are where the light comes through. That's it. So,
Yes. Oh, yes.
yeah.
Right. Leonard Cohen. Yes. Like Joni Mitchell and that group.
Right? All that group. Yes, those people that recorded their albums 50 years ago. Yes.
Yes, I'm familiar. Yes. And
Mm.
let's see if I can think of one. Edmund Fitzgerald. Is that a song?
The
Yes.
Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, that's Gordon Lightfoot, another
Gordon
great Canadian
Lightfoot.
singer-songwriter. Yes.
Yes. I grew up listening to Gordon Lightfoot. I just got the name of the song and the guy mixed up. But yes.
Yes. Not the Wreck of the Gordon Lightfoot, it's the Wreck of
The
the
wreck
Edmund
of the
Fitzgerald.
Gordon Lightfoot. Yes. Are
Hey,
you familiar with that?
my life partner, Jenny, is a huge Gordon Lightfoot fan.
Oh,
We
yeah.
went to see him together late in his career.
Okay. Very good. I can't remember any other names, but I was impressed I could at least come up with something you recognized.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Well, what's new with you this week, Jim?
So I'm all about being healthy this week. So I have my little ring that tells me if I'm sleeping well enough. Not like I could do it on my own. I need a ring to say I'm sleeping. I have my little CGM thing that's telling me if what I'm eating is right or not. And so I'm all about trying to be prepared to be in good shape for all that I'm doing. So health is the thing for me this week. What about you?
What's new for me is I feel very accomplished that I've been reading a lot more books for fun. I've been really focused on trying to sprinkle more time in for joy. And so reading books has brought me a lot of joy. I have been sitting in my favorite spot in the house for at least 30 minutes a day, maybe not all at once, but reading and going through a lot of the books that are collecting dust on my library. So that's something I'm prioritizing more me time, and it's making me feel a whole lot more whole.
Oh, that sounds great. You know what else I'll add to my list is I've been having lots of conversations with Christian Van Nuremberg on Marco Polo. And it's just such a joy that we don't agree with each other, and Christian and I have this trip we're taking. We're going to go hiking in Nepal in November. I'm going to do this trek to celebrate my 70th birthday. And, but we disagree all the time, but the disagreements are great because our goal is let's do the right thing, not let's be right. So we're not positional. And I think my thinking is so much, and John Campbell, the same thing. He's in on a lot of the conversations too. And it's so great to have friends that you don't agree with, but who ultimately you will agree with because you'll think things through. So it's been life-giving to be able to talk about things from different perspectives and not feel it has to be this way or that way. And we like everything is worked out. Eventually we come to a solution, but that's been something I'm conscious of this week as I look back on my days. It's been great to have these life-giving conversations where difference is good, not bad.
Mhm. It's such a life-giving relationship in general. It's wonderful. And Christian is actually the one who inspired me to find more time for joy because I've been taking his Radical Learners course. And he's the reason that I finally said, well, even though, and what's my question? When I'm not at my best, how can I recharge? And that question from Christian in his course is what sent me on this journey to go back to my library and pick a book and find some time to read. Yes, I believe he's very life-giving. He's even that way through the course online.
He's a 1 in a million, at least, maybe 1 in a billion human being. He he
Hey.
he and I've spent weeks with him, traveling
Yeah.
around the world, going to different places. It's always now I don't know what it's going to be like hiking in Nepal, and it's like 17,000 feet elevation. He'd be like, "What the heck have you done to me here?" But so far, uh, he's just he's just a good man, dedicated to doing what's right, kind, considerate, attentive, open to trying different things. If someone says, "Do you want to do this?" He usually says yes, just to try it out. So he's a great friend. There's a blessing in having good friends.
Yeah. You're going to come back with great stories. I can't wait to hear them.
Well, we'll be doing on the coach and the motorcycle thing, so it'll be on
That's right.
Instagram every
Update.
day. They'll be posted. Yeah, so you'll be able to watch my scruffy beard fill out when I'm on that trek.
Yeah, 2 weeks, right?
So at least 2 weeks, yeah, maybe 17 days, something like that.
Wonderful. Okay, are you ready for my random question that you don't even know is coming your way?
Yeah, well, so far they've all been that way, but go
Okay,
ahead.
well, so I sent you a couple weeks ago, I sent you an episode from my favorite true crime podcast.
Yes, you did.
How's it going?
I'm just saving it for the perfect time.
That's such a great response.
I want to just watch it casually. I want to really give it my full attention. So I haven't reached that point where my sleep and my glucose are lined up perfectly. So when I get it all together, then I'll listen to it.
My ring says I'm not ready to listen to your true crime episode. I want you to know I intentionally picked out the episode I sent to you because of the location.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where is it? I remember reading and thinking, she picked it. Was it Kansas? Kansas.
Kansas.
Yeah.
Yes, because I'd be curious to know if you knew the street names or a couple of other things that were mentioned or even the case in general. But yeah, I can't wait. Whenever your ring gives you the green light,
I
let
get
me
the green light. I'm going.
know. All right. Well, Jim, I'm really excited for our conversation today. It's something I think that is a frequently asked question in our virtual institute for sure, and other workshops like the Impact Cycle too. So today our topic is the collaborative exploration of data. But before we even jump into that, I wondered if you could explain to us what exactly does that mean?
So the two words collaborative and data, explorations in there. But what do we mean by collaborative? Really, we could just say, how do you talk about data from a partnership perspective? And I think it's really important to understand, and we call that dialogical interactions. And the way a dialogical interaction works is kind of what happens with Christian and I when we talk. We have differences, but the difference is we feel completely safe to say what we think. He's not trying to please me with his comments. I'm not trying to please him. I'm also not trying to talk him into it. It's just mutual exploration of ideas. And when you take the partnership approach, the person who's going to apply the ideas is the decision maker. And they have a voice in the conversation as important as mine, maybe more important. I started to use, I have this app on my phone for chess. When you play chess and you time it? So I can time recordings of my coaching conversations and see how much was I talking, how much was my partner talking. Just they're free, just to see it. And if I'm coaching, the other person should talk a fair bit, most of the time. And but the main thing about a partnership conversation is the other person feels 100% okay saying what they think. They're sharing their ideas, and I'm not trying to convince them to do what I think they should do. We are collaboratively exploring these ideas. And there are critical points in the impact cycle for that kind of conversation. You have a partnership or a dialogical conversation when you set the goal. You have it when you talk about the clear picture of reality. You have it when you identify the strategy. You have it when you talk about what the strategy is going to look like. And then you do the collaborative exploration of data. Now that we've started, what's working, what isn't working. And we're two equals, two professionals exploring it together. It's not I'm up here and you're down here. I'm bringing things that you might not see. I'm sharing stuff, but I'm not in any way. As Miller and Rolnick say, this is one of my favorite phrases. We're not taking sides. We're talking about it together. That's the essence of the partnership approach. And we don't do that just to be nice. We do it because there's a much greater likelihood a person will change if they feel they can say what they think and they can explore ideas together instead of them just having to nod their head yes and go off and do their own thing. When I try to tell the person what to do, we end up often in a vicious cycle of I push harder and they push back. But when I interact with the other person as a partner, they should feel safe to say whatever they think. I don't want to do that. It's just too much work. I don't have time for that. If that's how they're feeling, they should feel comfortable saying that.
That's wonderful, Jim. And it really helped me when you started walking through the impact cycle because just like in our workshops or in the institutes where we say, here's where data shows up and here's where the partnership principle shows up. It really helped me for you to say, well, this part's collaborative and then this part's collaborative, because it really does remind us that each time we're talking about data, we aren't, like you said, taking sides from Miller and Rolnick. That's a really helpful perspective. I'm glad you shared that. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
No, I think that's good.
So, what exactly do you mean by data, though, when we're collaboratively exploring it with teachers?
Well, the data rules book kind of describes it, and there's data around engagement, there's data around achievement, and there's data around teaching practices. So I could be looking at behavioral engagement. Do the kids look like they're engaged? I could be looking at uh, cognitive engagement. Are the kids getting out of the activity what they should? I could be looking at emotional engagement. Do the kids look like they belong? Did they communicate that they belong in school? That they feel safe? That they like coming to school? That they have positive experiences? And so lots of ways of looking at engagement, and any of those could be a goal. And same thing for achievement. And with achievement, it's are we talking about knowledge or skills or big ideas? And are we talking about acquisition or transfer of the knowledge? And then what's the right assessment tool? Should we use a rubric? Should we use a check for understanding? Should we use bell work, like an exit ticket, perhaps, something like that, or just a little quiz or a brief constructed response? So those two things become clear. And then there's other things with respect to teaching practices, like the kind of questions that were asked, the ratio of interaction, um, a teacher talk versus student talk, and opportunities to respond. And so those are things I might talk about with the teacher. Once we set the goal, we're going to look at data about the goal. So if the teacher says, for example, I coached somebody at the Institute with Brian Goodwin, and she was teaching Shakespeare. And it was a role play activity, but it was real coaching. And her questions, she had a video of a teacher asking questions. The questions were all close-ended, right or wrong questions. And so she looked at the video. She says, well, I really want to change my questioning. And I said, well, if you change your questioning, what will be different for the kids? And then we landed on the kids would demonstrate agreement by asking higher level questions and giving higher level responses. So then she said, well, how are we going to get that in a way that's not too intrusive? And I said, well, I'll just record it on my phone. I'll load it into ChatGPT and have it sorted out for us, and then I'll bring it back to you. And so she'll get a list of the questions, and she'll get a list of the statements, all the things kids said, and then we'll be able to go through each one of them and code what the responses are like to move it forward. That's an example of data. We'll have the data on what happens, and it's going to be unanimous. We won't know the teacher's name. We won't know the kids, and we'll just have a listing of the questions and the statements kids make, and then we'll code those things to say, is it higher level or lower level? That's the way we're going to roll.
That's an interesting use of AI. Hey, Jim, have you ever thought about exploring AI with instructional coaching?
It's coming. Just wait.
Yay. Because that's such a great idea. Jim, when you were talking, the activity I used to think, and now I know, I was almost having that moment where I used to think before I read the impact cycle that when I went into a teacher's classroom as the coach, that I would watch the teacher and I would write down things that the teacher did or didn't do, and that was my data. Now I know that I'm watching the kids. Are they engaged? How can we increase engagement? Are they understanding what they're learning? How can we increase achievement? And the teaching practices that also directly influence the students. And it's really helpful for me as a coach, and then probably for our listeners to hear you explain that. Because just last week in the Virtual Institute, someone said, I had no idea that you could collect data on engagement. I just always thought it had to be achievement. Have there been other misconceptions that you've heard about what data is or is not?
I would say that the big one is that data is only standardized test scores.
Mhm.
And then when we talk about data, that's what we're talking about. But it's not to say that's not a good idea, but the data needs to be gathered frequently enough that you can see if the teaching strategy is working or not. So we would say weekly. But you can still look at you still have a goal to increase the standardized test scores. It's just that you need to be able to measure every week, not only in 2 months. And my little analogy, which I probably said on here, to only look at the standardized test scores, it's like having a GPS that only tells you when you arrive. You don't know if you're on track or off track. You just know if you're there. And so Meg Grosclose, who I think you know, is a person I've worked with, and we did one-to-one coaching together. When she set a goal with her teacher, and I just interviewed Meg this week, they wanted to have a higher level of engagement, but they wanted to tie it to standards. So they used exit tickets. They gave the kids a question that was derived from the standard prompts. They had a curriculum they were using that lists all these things. So they made a question each week, and the teacher, her name's Rachel, she wanted to get to 90% correct responses on those exit tickets. When they started, it was 60%. So they were measuring engagement, but it was still tied to the standardized test scores. So there's lots of things you can do once you understand data is like the GPS for your class. And this is what I'm looking for. Then it becomes really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So, Jim, for all the coaches and the leaders who are out there listening, can you tell us how can we collaboratively share positive data?
So probably any positive data, unless it's ingenuine, is going to be helpful. I remember one of our team members. We'll keep it unanimous so we don't expose the school this happened in. But she was working with the principal, and the principal wrote down their walkthrough comment before they entered the class.
Ooh.
And the walkthrough comment was, "You are a breath of fresh air." That was the comment. So this person had decided what they were going to say about what they were going to see before they actually saw it. Well, that's not really going to be productive. Learning how to share positive information effectively, to me, is a life skill. It's really important as a parent, as a spouse, if you're in a committed relationship. And the people who shape my thinking on this are Keegan Leahy. They wrote this great book, and they say that positive comments have three characteristics. One of them is it's direct. One of them is it's specific, and one of them is it's non-attributive. So by specific, what do we mean? Well, specific means I'm really clear on I describe the thing. I don't make a general statement. General statements can seem kind of lazy. So I say, here's a specific thing I saw you do, and I say it clearly. But directive means I don't say it in the third person, I say it in the first person. So if I'm in a team meeting, for example, and I'm a leader and I'm going to give positive information, I don't say, let's all give Jessica credit for doing this good thing she did. I say, Jessica, here's what I saw you do, and I'm grateful for this. So it's in the first person, not in the third person. But the one that I think is really important, I mean, every teacher knows the importance of specific feedback, but the one that I think is most important is the non-attributive. So and this is where it becomes like like any kind of feedback you give is going to be better if it's specific and if it's direct, first person versus third person, if you've got the specific details. But this is where it becomes dialogical. Instead of me telling you, thank you for doing such a great job on these podcasts. You're such an organized person. I just like how you've got everything together. It's great. You've really got it together as a human being. There is a possibility that if I give you that kind of feedback, you might go, man, if you saw me scrambling to get together this morning, you wouldn't call me an organized person. You can find in your whole life, there's probably some point when you're not organized. And that's what you think of when somebody gives you attributive feedback. You go, oh yeah, if you really saw me with my daughter, you wouldn't say I'm kind. You can come up with a non-example of it and just prove it. So what Keegan and Leahy say, and I've modified their words a little bit, they say, instead of telling the person they have an attribute, you're kind, you're hardworking, you're a great teacher, you're a warm-hearted human being, you're dedicated, you're loyal, you're organized, you're patient. Instead of telling that person that thing, you tell them the evidence that proves that specific thing. So instead of me telling a teacher, Joni, you're really patient, I say, Joni, I watched you with Isaiah. You asked him a question. It took him 10 seconds to answer, and you just patiently waited for him to answer. And then when he gave the answer, you praised him, and the kid lit up like a Christmas tree. That was such a cool thing to watch. And when you give people that feedback, the evidence that proves it, as opposed to the general statement, they go, I did do that. That did really happen. And it lands at a much deeper level. But also, this is where the partnership part comes in. I'm not telling them what to make of it. I'm letting them figure it out for themselves. So I don't know if you noticed this, but I did this week. I said to you, I'm so grateful for how well you organize these things because it takes the burden off my shoulders and I know I can count on you. It makes my life easier so much because of the way you organize these things. If I'd said you were organized, it might not have had the same landing as when I can say, here's the thing you did. Here's the evidence that proves the general statement. So, and it's a partnership thing because I'm not telling the teacher what it means. I'm just saying, here's this thing I saw. Was that ever cool? And then I let them interpret it however they want, even though probably what's going to happen is they'll go, that time it did really work out. So that's the first part of the collaborative exploration of data, is how to share positive information. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's really helpful because when you said the difference of even what you shared with me earlier this week, I could feel that difference. And I try to think of the teachers in the classroom who have so many things going on, and a coach sits down with them. They're nervous about what that coach is going to share with them, or if they've collected data, they're afraid of what it might mean. But when you're collaboratively sharing it, like you're saying, as a partner, I think the teacher feels safer. They're more open to discussing what to do next, inventing improvements in the impact cycle. So I couldn't help but the whole time think of the relationship. And people all the time say, well, how can I build trust this way? By collaboratively sharing data, by making sure that we are saying it in a way that the teacher receives it and sees the value of that feedback. So I was just thinking the whole time about, yes, you're talking about partnership and data and collaboratively sharing this information, but simultaneously, you're also building the trusting relationship that has to be in place for it to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think when you do it effectively, now it takes work.
Mhm.
It's much easier to say, you're really, oh, you're really a great teacher. That's a much easier thing to say than just to give the specific evidence that proves it. But when you give the evidence, it's like you inject the person with life serum. If you tell them the general statement, they go, "Oh, I'm not that great. You just got me on a good day or something." But if you say, "I saw this specific thing happen," now Keegan and Leahy say we would share our experience of the person, but I like to say the evidence that proves the general statement, and then they can make their own conclusions. And you can see the person's physically respond in a positive way. You can see it land. It's really a cool thing when it works, but it takes discipline, takes practice. Just like every other aspect of coaching, it's about learning how to communicate in a way that's gonna help that other person flourish. That's the thing you're doing.
And in managing challenging conversations with Claudia Oad, it's been great to learn from her and learn with her. And she shares when you're preparing for a challenging conversation, one of the things you do is you prepare. And I'm thinking about this conversation, the collaborative exploration of data. Another thing you can do as you prepare and practice to deliver feedback that's non-attributive and specific and direct is you can practice and prepare it and write it down and rehearse it or try it on someone else. And then that's how you can get even better at doing that. So just making the connections of that preparedness and practice that you were talking about.
I've done a thing where I journaled, where I've tried experiments and I've journaled on when I did it. And for a couple days, I did it with Jenny. I just kept trying to give her all these positive, appreciative comments, non-attributive, specific. And we're sitting down at having dinner the second day, and I said something, and she looked at me and she said, "I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it." She's like, and then I use an example. I don't know if I've told you this, but I use an example from like when I read the book in 2012. I think I was flying, and I wrote it in the book what I was going to say to Jenny when I got home, because she had done me a huge favor. I thought I better get my act together and give her positive feedback, and it kind of worked. And then so I've used that example in workshops all the time. And Jenny said to me about a year ago, she said, "Doesn't it trouble you that you have to go back to 2012 for an example of when you gave me positive feedback that worked?"
Yeah, that's a long time, Jim. But you've done it again this week. So,
Yeah,
once every 12 to 13 years is pretty
right.
good. Well, Jim, I wonder for our last question before we move to our epilogue, what does it look like when we share other kinds of data?
Well, so, you might be gathering data on engagement or achievement or even teaching practices, the kind of questions that were asked. And it's that idea of not taking sides. And it's the idea of letting the other person make sense of it. But you also don't silence yourself to some extent if you think you have something to contribute. But often, when you look at the data of what's happening, the first question is, okay, here's where we are. Here's where you want to get to. And like take Meg's example of they were looking at the exit tickets and it was 60% correct, 70% correct. They had to keep making adjustments along the way. And Meg, I'm sure, didn't just say, here's what I need you to do. They would say, let's explore what we could do. And there'd be a real back and forth energy between both of them where I don't silence my ideas, but do you think this would work? No, I don't think with these kids. Maybe in the other class, but this class, I don't. And there's this sense of complete openness about what they're going to do. The kind of thing I talked about with respect to my conversations with Christian, where difference is good. And there's a recognition that the teacher is the professional. Ultimately, they decide what's going to happen in their classroom. Because the truth is, they do decide. They're not going to do it if they don't think it's a good idea. They might do a bare minimum to say they did it, but real level of commitment, they have to choose to do it. So, I'd say if I'm looking at questions, I might say, well, let's just code these questions and see what's there. What kind of question do you? So the teacher's doing a lot of decision making. If I gather data on, I don't know, if we look at the experience sampling chart for gathering engagement data, where we look at things over, every 10 minutes we take a measure of sort of a measure of engagement. I would look at it and it says, well, let's see what was happening here. And let's look at it. And it's a real sense in which we explore it together. So there's me. If you visualize this, there's me and there's a teacher, and we're sitting beside each other. And in front of this is this third thing, this data. And my metaphor would be, let's say you're walking through an art gallery, you and your friend, and you see this painting by Mark Rothko. And it's like colors and lines and a big box. And you say to your friend, well, what do you think that painting is? And your friend says, I'm thinking maybe that's a sunset and that's a mountain. And that's kind of what it is. And maybe the person's like imagining it, but not seeing it because it's so blurry. And then I say, I was thinking it was an old Macintosh computer and there's the keyboards. That's what I was thinking. I'm not trying to tell him what it means. He's not trying to tell me what it means. We're just exploring it together. There's that real sense of both brains are involved in the conversation. And if there's a mutual respect and trust between the two people and both brains are involved, it's going to be better than if it's just one brain. Two people thinking is going to be better than one. If I'm trying to talk you into it, it's not going to be the same. But if we are truly exploring it together and bouncing ideas back and forth, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 4 or 5. I mean, together we can see a lot more. And that's the collaborative exploration of data. It's looking at the data as a third point in a dialogical conversation.
That last line you said, together we can see a lot more. That is such a great way to put it. And it goes back to the quote you shared from the other authors of, we're not taking sides. So we're not taking sides. The more we look at it together, the more we can see. That's the true spirit of the collaborative exploration of data. Do you think I captured that right?
I think that's a great way of putting it. I think that's exactly it. I think we do it pretty well. I don't think there's a sense in which I'm telling you or you're telling me. And the cool thing is disagreement is not a bad thing, especially it's the teacher is going to decide. So I just want you to know, you're going to do what you're going to do. I'm not here to tell you what to do. There are times you have a telling conversation, but not when you're engaged in a coaching conversation with a professional. That's not the spot.
Right. Well, Jim, this has been such a great conversation. And to close out our show today, we have two final questions on the topic of this collaborative exploration of data. So the first one is, how is everything that you've shared with us today different than giving people feedback?
Yeah. People often ask me for feedback, and I usually don't give it to them because I'm like, well, who am I to give you feedback? Why should I give you feedback? And then when I do give it to them, because they're like, no, I want your feedback. I say, well, what about this? Then they don't like it. And so to me, it's much more productive. Now, don't get me wrong. There are certain things where feedback is good. When I was a hockey coach, I would have my players practice a breakout thing. Breakout is how you get the puck out of the zone. And so this player goes here, this guy goes behind the net. And my son told me, Dad, we have done that thing. And the parents would complain. We just did the same drill over and over and over again. But he said to me, he said, Dad, I can close my eyes and shoot the puck and know the player is going to be there because they learned it so many times. But if somebody wasn't in the right place, I'd say, no, you're in the wrong place. If they weren't holding their stick right to get the pass, I'd say, here's how you hold the stick. Where it's cut and dried and crystal clear, and I'm teaching you how to do something, then feedback is great. It's really helpful. But for complex practices like inspiring, like creating a culture, a learner-friendly culture in the classroom, it's not cut and dried. It's not crystal clear what you need to do. It's messy and ambiguous. If it was crystal clear, we wouldn't have to begin the collaborative exploration of data because we would have hit the goal. Well, we didn't hit the goal because it's messy. And then that's where you use the collaborative exploration of data. And their feedback, me telling the person what to do, it shuts them out of the conversation. It's much better if I say, well, I got an idea. Let me share what I'm thinking. You tell me what you think. and we kind of discuss it together. That's, I think, way more powerful. And, you know, coaches who use video will tell you, looking at questioning, for example, it's so much more powerful when the teacher looks at video of their lesson and makes their own decisions about what they see, rather than when I show up and say, you should ask more open questions, and you should ask fewer right or wrong questions. If they can see it for themselves, it's way more powerful than me telling them.
Mhm. I
Is
fell
that
for
what
that.
I was going to say? Is that what you found?
Yes, I was actually going to say I fell for this early on as a coach. Like, "Hey, can you give me some feedback?" "Yes, thought it was great. I think you did this well and this well." But what often happened in those situations is instantly the status changed
Right.
because I became, well, I know what good teaching is, and well, you were almost there, but you could go a little bit further, and like, you're
Right.
not quite to my level yet. So that status was not the same. And
Mm.
then when I learned more about it's not what I think, it's really a measure of their own growth, I started asking them, well, what was the goal that you were working on today? And then how do you think you did on your lesson based on that goal? That became, well, they're self reflecting instead of measuring their value based on my thoughts. So, yeah, I agree with everything.
A big thing about that too is people often think coaches give feedback. That's their thing. But I think it's much better to mutually look at the data than for me to give feedback. Because first off, that person sees things I don't see. They have a different set of eyes, a different perspective, and they know the kids. And so to just leave them out of the conversation doesn't really work. And I agree with you. There's the whole issue of status. But if I can let them come to the same determination themselves, or maybe see things differently than I do, if they come to the conclusion, it's just way more powerful to me. There's this phrase, um, a glow and a grow.
Yep.
You know, like, I don't want somebody giving me a glow and a grow. Who are you to tell me? I don't want that. I mean, let's look at it together like two professionals instead of you giving me a glow and a grow. So, and not only that, often the glow is not effectively given positive feedback. It's much better if it's going to be non-attributive than if I say, "Oh, you really did a good job of communicating the success criteria at the start of the lesson." Much better if you determine it yourself. If you're the teacher, you figure it out in partnership with the teacher, with the coach. It's a whole different thing. It's to let the other person know I'm not better than you, and I want to hear your ideas. And maybe I do know a whole lot more about blended reading or whatever we're working on. But you know more about your kids, and you're not going to become an independent practitioner, a person who thinks on their own for themselves, able to solve your own problems if I'm fixing your problems for you all the time. So it's about doing it together. That's the whole thing.
That's great, Jim. So we've had all this conversation about data and more ideas. But Jim, if the listeners were curious to explore these concepts even more, what are some ways that they might join us to learn even more about data?
Well, we have so many ways for people to learn. And I think probably the one, it says on my thing here, plug the institute. So I think that's what I'm supposed to do. So we have the virtual institute, we have the face-to-face institute. The face-to-face usually sells out. So I'd say sign up early if you want to come. And it's 5 days of going deep. And then there's lots of shorter courses. And then we have this one-to-one coaching where you could be coached by me or you or someone else in our team who's helping you either master the elements of coaching or helping leaders organize their coaching or even coaching teachers. So there's lots of ways of access right there at instructionalcoaching.com.
That was a great plug there, Jim.
Good. It says I'm supposed to even highlight it.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Well, I think if your partner doesn't mind, your collaborating teacher, to video record the conversation and watch the teacher. Today in the introduction to leadership coaching course, there's another plug. We talked about noticing as a part of coaching. And I learned this from Hae-Sun Moon, but to just focus on the person you're coaching, watch the video, looking at them. How do they respond when you share ideas? If you really watch carefully, you can tell when what you're doing is unleashing potential or shutting the person down. And I think done effectively, the way in which you explore data, either positive or negative data, if you want to call it negative, um, a goal directed data, that's not necessarily negative, really. But Done effectively, it should be unleashing potential, not making the person feel less than. And you can see it in the video. The video will tell you. So I'd say videos are really key. What about you? What have you got as a last thought about this?
That it takes practice, that all of these ideas today are wonderful for instructional coaching. But I can't help but think of, I shared this in one of our courses now, I don't remember which, maybe Impact Cycle Workshop. Be careful comparing wherever you are in your journey of instructional coaching to where someone else might be. It takes a lot of practice to put all of these ideas into your context or apply them in an instructional coaching cycle with a teacher. When I started as a coach, I looked at my mentor or I looked at my coach who I had in the IC program, and I thought, gosh, I don't know if I want to be like her, or I want to coach like him, or I'm just not there yet. And I made it of a comparison between us. And I think people just remember that you're learning, and everything you do to get closer to your goal is progress. So I think it's just that, is these ideas are so wonderful, Jim, that you share with us, and to give yourself grace as you practice them, listeners.
I had one more thought as I was listening to you, and that idea of practice. I think practicing on people close to you, your kids, uh, if you're in a committed relationship, your partner in your relationship, just try it out. And what you're looking for is not telling the person what they are, not passing judgment, not saying, I really like the way, this thing about you. You say, here's the specific evidence that proves the general statement. When you were playing with your younger sister and you paused and you let her have the toy instead of taking it away, you should have seen the smile I saw on her face. Instead of saying you were really nice with your sister. And when you start to practice it, you will feel the impact of non-attributive, positive, specific feedback. You will see how it works. And it's in the doing that it becomes clear. So I'd say try it out. It can't hurt to be more positive. And sometimes in busy lives, the people we most want to communicate love to are the ones that we have the hardest time doing it. So try it out in life and see what happens. I think I'm going to try to do it today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for our conversation. And thank you, everyone, for listening today. If you found today's episode helpful, it would help us if you liked or followed the podcast. You can also leave us a rating or a comment so we can continue creating meaningful content just for you. Thank you. And until next time, go forth and leave great coaching conversations. Bye, Jim.
Bye bye.